I'm Emily, just a regular girl working as a florist in a big city shop. Life's pretty straightforward for me, wake up, work with flowers, and sleep. But, let me tell you about the day that kinda turned everything on its head. It was a regular morning with the sun shining bright and the shop bustling with the usual crowd when he walked in. This guy, Tom, was a new face, probably in his late 20s, dressed sharp, and carried himself like he owned the place. He walked straight up to me with a confident stride. "Hey, I need a bouquet, something real special," Tom said, scanning the store but keeping a casual tone. I put together a mix of vibrant roses, delicate lilies, and some exotic orchids, making sure every stem was perfect. Handing over the bouquet, I couldn't help but add, "Whoever's getting this is super lucky. You sure know how to pick 'em." He chuckled, a bit of a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, it's not for a lady friend, if that's what you're thinking. It's for my mom. Her birthday." I felt my cheeks heat up a bit. "Oh, right. That's sweet of you." "Yeah, well, she deserves it," he said, his tone softening. "How much do I owe you?" After watching him leave, I shook off the awkwardness and went back to work. But guess what? The next day, just as I was arranging a new batch of tulips, Tom popped back in. This time, he had a different look in his eye. "Hey, Emily, right? I was here yesterday," he started, like I could forget. "Yeah, I remember. Need another bouquet today?" I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. "Nope, not today. Actually, I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee with me. There's a nice place just around the corner. My treat," he said, his gaze steady. I hesitated for a moment, not really sure what to make of it. Like a date? "Yeah, why not? Could be fun." He shrugged, looking casual, but hopeful. I figured why not, it's just coffee. "Sure, let me grab my bag." That coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into late-night talks. Tom was charming, no doubt about that. He worked for some big tech company downtown, knew a lot about a lot, and made sure our cups were never empty. Before I knew it, I was laughing more than I had in months, and he was right there with me, matching my smiles with his own. After that first coffee date, things with Tom really took off faster than I expected. He was always popping into the shop or texting me to see when I was free. He liked making plans on the fly, and I guess I liked that about him, kept things exciting. "So, what's the plan for tonight?" I asked one evening as we left the coffee shop, the city lights starting to flicker on around us. "Thought we might catch a movie, then grab some dinner. How's that sound?" Tom replied, his hands tucked into his jeans pockets. "Sounds perfect." I smiled, happy to spend another night out with him. Movie nights turned into concert weekends, and dinners turned into midnight walks along the river. It was like we couldn't get enough of each other. Tom was all about the grand gestures too. He surprised me one night after a particularly rough day at work. "Hey, you look like you could use a break," he said as he walked into the shop, a mischievous grin on his face. "Yeah, today's been crazy. What's up?" I wiped my forehead, dropping a bunch of wilted daisies into the bin. "I think you need a change of scenery. How about we drive up to the coast this weekend? Just you and me?" He leaned on the counter, his eyes sparkling. I couldn't believe it. "Really? Like a mini vacation?" "Why not? We both could use some fresh air, and I know a great little place by the beach," he said, looking hopeful. That weekend getaway was something out of a dream. The beach was beautiful, the food was amazing, and Tom, he was perfect. We talked about everything under the sun, from our crazy childhood stories to our hopes for the future. It was during one of those deep conversations, under a sky full of stars, that he caught me off guard. "Emily, I've been thinking," he started, his voice serious for once. "Yeah?" I turned to face him, the sea breeze playing with my hair. "I don't want to scare you off or anything, but I think I'm falling for you. Hard." He took my hand, squeezing it gently. I felt my heart skip a beat. "Tom, I feel the same way." His smile then was enough to light up the darkest night. Good, because I have something else to ask you. And just like that, a few weeks later, he was down on one knee, right there in the middle of my flower shop, with a ring that sparkled like his eyes did when he smiled. "Emily, will you marry me?" he asked, the shop filled with the scent of roses and lilies. It felt surreal, like a scene from one of those romantic movies we used to watch. But it was real, it was happening to me. "Yes, Tom, of course, I will." The cheers from my coworkers erupted around us, and Tom swept me into his arms, spinning me around. It was magical, unbelievable, and everything felt just right. When we told our families, they were over the moon. His parents hugged me tight, already calling me their daughter. My parents were just as thrilled, talking about wedding plans, and how they'd always hoped I'd find someone who made me smile like Tom did. Life after the wedding was bliss, at least, for a little while. But things started to shift when we found out I was pregnant. It should have been the happiest news, and it was, at first. Both our families were ecstatic, showering us with congratulations and gifts. But the reality of pregnancy hit me like a truck, and not in a good way. I started getting sick a lot. And I mean a lot. It wasn't just morning sickness, it was all day, can't get out of bed, can't smell anything without gagging sickness. I tried to keep working at the flower shop, but the scents that used to bring me joy were now my worst nightmare. One day, I was trying to arrange a bouquet when the nausea hit hard. I barely made it to the back room before I threw up. The decision to go on unpaid maternity leave wasn't easy. I knew it put us in a tight spot financially, but I had hoped Tom would understand. Turned out, I was half right. The day I told him about my decision, I could see the change in his demeanor instantly. His usual warm eyes went cold, and his voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. "Unpaid leave? Are you serious, Emily? How are we supposed to handle the bills with you not working?" he snapped, pacing back and forth in our tiny living room. I tried to stay calm, though inside, I was trembling. "I can't work, Tom. You've seen how bad it's gotten. And it's not like I want to be sick." His frustration boiled over, and he threw his hands up in the air. "So what, I'm supposed to just handle everything? What are you going to do all day, sit around while I bust my ass?" I flinched at his tone, feeling a sting behind my eyes. "I'll do what I can at home. I can still handle some chores, maybe start some freelance floral design from the house." "Great, Emily, really great. As if those little gigs are going to cover anything. We need real money." He cut me off, his voice laced with sarcasm. I felt so helpless and trapped, watching the man I loved turn into someone I barely recognized over money issues and my health problems. It was like a bad dream, and I kept hoping I'd wake up. "Tom, please, let's just try to work this out. We're going to be parents. We need to support each other," I pleaded, reaching out to him. He looked at my hand, then at me, his anger slowly fading into resignation. I know. I'm sorry, Em. I'm just stressed, that's all." But the apologies didn't change the situation. The days were long, filled with discomfort and loneliness, as Tom buried himself in work, leaving me to deal with the pregnancy and the house as best as I could. As the weeks passed, my pregnancy only got tougher, and the chasm between Tom and me widened. My days blended into a continuous loop of discomfort and failed attempts at normalcy. Trying to keep the house together was becoming a nightmare. One evening, Tom came home to find me on the couch, a cold cloth over my forehead, trying to stave off another wave of nausea. The sight seemed to set him off instantly. "Still on the couch, Emily? I thought you were going to handle the chores today," he said, his voice sharp, tinged with irritation. I sat up, feeling a surge of dizziness as I did. "I tried, Tom, I really did. But the smells, everything just makes me sicker. I can't stand for too long without feeling like I'll pass out." He threw his keys on the table with a clatter. "You know, when you said you'd handle things at home, I actually thought you meant it. But every day, I come back to this." I felt a sting at his words, a mix of guilt and frustration building inside me. I am trying. But doing the dishes, cooking, it all just makes me feel worse. I can't help it, Tom. Well, maybe you need to try harder. We can't live like this, Emily. I work all day, and I can't come home to a mess and no dinner. It's not fair. His voice rose, echoing off the walls. The unfairness of his expectations weighed heavily on me. I struggled to my feet, steadying myself against the back of the sofa. It's not fair to me either, Tom. I'm not just lounging around for fun. This is really hard for me. But it's like you're not even trying, he shot back, his anger palpable. All day at home, and what do you have to show for it? I'm out busting my ass to make sure we have what we need, and you can't even keep the house clean? His words cut deep, branding me as lazy and useless, and shame washed over me. But the hurt was turning into resentment. I'm carrying your child, Tom. Our child. Shouldn't that count for something? Don't you think I wish things were different? He paused, looking at me as if seeing me for the first time that evening. I know it's tough, but you calling it tough doesn't make our life any easier. I need more from you, Emily. The room felt colder, the air between us thick with unsaid things. I'm doing the best I can, I whispered, my voice breaking. His face hardened. Well, maybe your best isn't good enough. That night, as I lay in bed alone, his words replayed in my mind. I thought about reaching out to my parents or his, but I couldn't bring myself to worry them or admit how bad things had gotten. The idea of leaving, of taking refuge with my family in another city, flickered in my mind like a distant lighthouse. Yet, the thought of making such a big decision on my own was daunting. By the time I scheduled another appointment with my doctor, the tension at home was unbearable. Tom's patience was thinning by the day, and I was at my wits' end trying to balance my health with his expectations. Sitting in the waiting room, I practiced what I'd say to the doctor, hoping he might offer some kind of solution or at least validate what I was going through. When Dr. Lee called us into his office, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Emily, how are we feeling today? Dr. Lee asked as he ushered us in. I glanced at Tom, who seemed disinterested, his eyes fixed on his phone. Not great, honestly. The nausea is really bad, and it's causing some problems at home, I admitted, my voice shaky. Dr. Lee frowned, concerned. Nausea can be tough, especially if it's severe. Tom, are you aware of how this is impacting Emily? Tom looked up, slightly annoyed. Yeah, I know it's bad. But we all have our burdens, right? I work all day, and I come home to more stress. It's hard all around. The doctor nodded, his expression serious. Yes, it's hard for both of you. But it's important to understand that what Emily is experiencing is not within her control. It's a physical reaction to pregnancy hormones. Some women have it worse than others. Yeah, but how long is this supposed to last? I mean, is there something she can do to just get over it? Tom's frustration was evident. Dr. Lee took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Unfortunately, it varies. Emily, we can try a few different medications to help manage the symptoms. It's not about getting over it, but managing it so she can have some quality of life. I nodded eagerly, grateful for any help. That sounds good, anything to help ease this. Tom shrugged, not fully convinced. So, what? Are these meds going to fix everything? Can she start doing more around the house then? It's not a cure, Dr. Lee explained patiently. It's to help her cope better. As for household duties, it might be wise to adjust your expectations during this time. Pregnancy isn't a one-size-fits-all situation. Tom sighed loudly, his impatience showing. So I'm supposed to just keep handling everything? This isn't what I signed up for. The room went silent for a moment, the tension thick. Dr. Lee looked between us, his expression softening. Tom, this is a temporary phase. It's a time when support is crucial. Perhaps, considering some temporary help at home could relieve some of the pressure. I'm not hiring someone to do chores when we're already tight on money because of the unpaid leave, Tom snapped back. Dr. Lee tried again to explain, emphasizing the reality of my symptoms and the need for empathy and support. Tom, understanding and patience are vital here. It's not about one person doing more or less, it's about adapting to challenges together. However, despite Dr. Lee's efforts, Tom's frustration seemed only to grow. He stood abruptly, shaking his head. This is all just excuses, isn't it? You just don't want to do anything. I'm tired of this. With that, he walked out of the room, leaving me behind with the doctor. Dr. Lee gave me a sympathetic look, his disappointment evident. I'm sorry, Emily. I tried. One evening, out of nowhere, Tom dropped a bombshell. So, my boss, Mr. Henderson, is throwing a big party next week. He's a big family guy, loves seeing everyone with their spouses. That means you're coming with me, Em. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. The thought of a social gathering was overwhelming with how sick I'd been feeling lately. Tom, do you think that's a good idea? With how I've been? I started, hoping he'd understand. No, Em, it's not up for discussion. Mr. Henderson notices these things. It's important for my career that we both show up, he said firmly, cutting off any protest I might have had. But the people, the noise, the smells. I don't know if I can handle it, I replied, my voice weak, already dreading the thought. Tom's expression hardened as he crossed his arms. You have to, Em. It's important for my career. Can't you just try to hold it together for a few hours? The drive to the venue was tense, with Tom going over his talking points, while I tried to steady my breathing and calm my churning stomach. When we arrived, the blast of music from inside the venue hit me like a physical wave, and the mingled perfumes and food odors made my head spin. Remember, smile and try to look like you're having a good time, Tom whispered as we entered, his grip on my arm a bit too tight. I nodded weakly, managing a smile as a few of Tom's colleagues came over to introduce themselves. They were all smiles and handshakes, but all I could focus on was the overwhelming scent of perfume and food. It wasn't long before I felt the nausea rise, fast and unforgiving. Tom, I need to step outside for a bit, I murmured after a particularly strong wave of nausea hit me. Not now, Emily, he hissed, barely looking at me. Just hold on until after dinner, please. Trying to blend into the background, I sipped on some water, hoping to settle my stomach. But it was no use. Halfway through the dinner, I could feel a cold sweat break out over my forehead, and I knew I couldn't hold back any longer. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Tom, I need to go. Now, I said, my voice urgent. Tom looked at me, frustration and embarrassment coloring his features. Can't you see I'm in the middle of something here? He snapped quietly, his teeth clenched. I'm going to be sick, I whispered, feeling the room spin as people turned to look. Without waiting for him, I rushed toward the bathroom, but didn't make it. Right there, in front of all those people, my body gave up, and I was violently sick. The room went silent, save for the horrible sound of my embarrassment. When I finally stopped and looked up, tears of humiliation stinging my eyes, Tom was by my side, but his look was not one of concern. You just had to make a scene, huh? He muttered, helping me up not out of kindness, but to get me out of sight. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful, and dragged me into the corridor. Look what you've done. You're a pretender, Emily. Always making excuses. He yelled, his face inches from mine. I tried to pull away, feeling overwhelmed and scared. Tom, please, I'm really sick. Enough. I'm sick of your excuses. Get out of here on your own. I'm done dealing with this tonight, he shouted. He shoved me towards the exit, pushing me several times as I stumbled. Finally, he threw me into the hallway and stormed off. I leaned against the wall, gasping for air, my body weak from nausea and my heart breaking from his cruelty. Leaning against the wall of the corridor, I felt utterly humiliated and abandoned. My tears were just starting to dry when I heard footsteps approaching. An elderly man, whom I hadn't noticed before, came up to me, his expression concerned. I heard some yelling. "What happened here?" he asked in a stern but caring voice. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears started again, and I found myself pouring out everything. "My husband, he just doesn't understand. He thinks I'm pretending to be sick because of the pregnancy. He left me here after I got sick in front of everyone." The man's face turned sharply stern as he listened. "What's your husband's last name?" he asked with an intensity that made me shiver. "Morris. Tom Morris," I managed to say through sobs. His demeanor softened a bit as he nodded, understanding the situation better. "Come with me," he said gently, leading me to a quieter part of the venue, away from the noise and the overwhelming smells. He found an empty table, pulled out a chair for me, and handed me a glass of cool water. Sitting there, sipping water, helped me calm down a bit. The man remained with me, ensuring I was all right. Soon, the solemn part of the party began, and he excused himself, saying he had to take the stage. I watched as he walked up, and to my shock, the crowd erupted into applause. The man, now at the podium, started praising his employees for their commitment to family values. Then, his tone changed, and he started talking about respect for one's spouse. "There is a man here," he said, turning to look directly at Tom, "who has failed to show the respect and support a husband should to his wife." Tom's face went pale as he was called up to the stage. I watched, frozen, as Tom walked up to join the man, the same man who had just helped me. "My wife and I have 4 children," the man continued, his voice stern and loud enough for everyone to hear, "and I understand how different each pregnancy can be. It is no excuse to mistreat or doubt your spouse." Tom tried to defend himself, stammering about how it was all a misunderstanding, how he thought I was just avoiding responsibilities. The murmurs in the hall grew loud, filled with disbelief and disapproval. The man on the stage, who I now understood was Mr. Henderson, Tom's boss, responded firmly, "That is no way to treat anyone, especially not your pregnant wife." His next words dropped like a hammer. "Tom Morris, you are no longer employed at this company. We respect family values here, something you've clearly forgotten." After the party, Mr. Henderson drove me back to my house. He made sure Tom wouldn't cause any trouble while I packed up my belongings. It was surreal, gathering my life into boxes with Tom's boss watching over things, ensuring everything stayed civil. Tom was silent, his anger from the night before replaced by a sullen quiet. Mr. Henderson didn't say much either, but his presence was a solid reassurance that I wasn't alone in this. Once everything was packed, Mr. Henderson drove me to a hotel. The next few weeks were a blur of finding a new apartment and dealing with the legalities of separation. When Tom's parents heard about what had happened, they reached out, full of apologies and offers to help. Despite everything, I was grateful for their support. They helped me cover the rent for my new place for several months. Life in my new apartment was quiet. I spent days preparing for the baby and nights wondering about the future. When my son Jack was born, it was like a light came back into my life. Holding him for the first time, I knew that no matter what had happened, starting over had been the right decision. Divorce proceedings were tough. Tom fought against it at first, but eventually gave in. Mr. Henderson was instrumental once again, providing a corporate lawyer to handle my case. The lawyer was sharp and empathetic, helping me secure a settlement that included compensation for emotional abuse and child support. The financial security was a relief. It meant I could start anew without constant worry. With my life somewhat stabilized, I returned to the flower shop. Mrs. Jenkins, my boss, welcomed me back with open arms. "We've missed you, Emily. The flowers haven't been the same without you," she said on my first day back. Working again felt therapeutic. Arranging bouquets, advising customers, and tending to the plants, I found peace and a sense of normalcy that had been missing from my life for too long. One afternoon, while arranging a particularly beautiful set of roses, my phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson checking in. "Just wanted to see how you and Jack are doing, Emily," he said, his voice warm over the phone. "We're doing well, thank you. Back at work, and it feels right," I responded, smiling as I snipped the stem of a rose. "That's great to hear. Remember, you ever need anything, I'm just a call away." Ending the call, I looked around at my surroundings, the colorful flowers, the photos of Jack I had pinned up by my workstation, and the gentle hum of daily life in the shop. It all felt like a new chapter had truly begun.